welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the books that I'm currently reading. Sorry if you hear my squeaky chair. It makes quite a lot of noise. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the books that I'm currently reading and just talk about some books that I've recently acquired as well. It's still Halloween in my mind, in my heart. I'm currently in the middle of quite a few books, but that's usually how I do it. I'm a mood reader, so I tend to just pick up things as I want to, as I see fit. I have such a vast reading list that's usually interconnected with whatever it is that I'm currently reading or whatever I'm currently fixated on. I'll jump from one author to maybe books that are either contemporaries or books that are in the same genre. If it's nonfiction, it'll be books that are in or books that are about related topics, or even their references, or books that authors that I also really enjoy when they were writing. I read a lot of classics, so a lot of the time there's just ample stuff for me to get my hands into. So the first book I want to talk about is my relaxation book, kind of. I'm really enjoying it. I love fairy tales and I love fantasy of this kind. So this is Patricia McKillip's Winter Rose. I actually have never read the fairy tale that it's based on or that it's a retelling of, but I do believe it's Tamlin that it's a retelling of. Yeah, it's just beautifully written, really like whimsical, sort of lyrical. It's like highly poetic, but not like overblown type of writing. I wouldn't say that it's very dense, but I do find myself taking extra time to try and sit with the imagery and imagine what it is that's being portrayed to me. And it's very immersive in that sense. So I only really like to sit down and read it when I'm in that headspace to really devote some time to trying to really internalize it. A lot of the language is really easy to understand, but it's very packed with sensory input. It reminds me in that way of John Keats's poem, the La Belle du Sans Merci. I don't speak French. I hope to learn how to speak French soon, so hopefully one day that pronunciation will be better. But yeah, the way that poem is just so like heavily layered in sensory input and language that is so evocative of the beauty in the world and the beauty in the natural world, and very dreamlike language. I would say this book has similar evocative qualities in its writing and its prose. So I'm not trying to rush it because it's kind of the book that I used to wind down anyway. But yeah, it's been on the back burner for me for the past couple days, but I hope to pick it up again soon. So the next book that I am currently reading is a book I just started last night, which is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Brontë. I've actually never read this before. I'm a big Brontë sister person. God, I fucking love them. And I just haven't read this yet. There are a couple of the Brontë sister books that I have not yet read, mostly by Charlotte, obviously, because she's the one who has the most novels and writing that we could read, since she lived the longest. But I have not yet read this. I read Agnes Grey probably a year or two back, and I didn't really enjoy it that much. I don't know, there wasn't much to enjoy in it. I think the writing was beautiful, was good. It was a bit more straightforward than I would say Emily's writing or even Charlotte's writing is, but I more so had issues with, I guess, the subject matter. I'm not somebody who reads a lot of books about children to begin with, but I definitely have a hard time reading about like annoying kids. Even though that is the whole point, showing the difficulties and the mistreatment governesses face. And I definitely can see the autobiographical elements, with, you know, parallels between Anne's own experience when she became a governess, for a chunk of time. It just was like not fun. It was mostly just like annoying to read. I found myself just kind of dreading picking it up, even though it's a relatively short novel. I'm really excited for this one, for the Tenant of Wildfall. I hear better things about this one than I do with Agnes Grey. I really am looking forward to getting into this, and yesterday actually I started it, and I had only gotten as far as the introduction or the preface to the like reprinted second edition. I wasn't shocked necessarily because I know a lot about the Bronte sisters, and um, it's not that I didn't expect Anne to be this way, but I found her tone in the introduction to be so refreshing, actually. Um, and I guess, you know, I haven't read this before, so, and I would say of the Bronte sisters, Anne is probably the one I pay the least, or I have paid the least attention to, being as Emily is my favorite sister. Um, but yeah, I just found the like proto-feminist elements of her introduction, and also, you know, the whole, even the whole factor that um, the Bronte sisters published under pseudonyms of male names under the guise that they were men, as the Bell brothers. In this introduction, after facing criticism, she is taking those critics to task about the way that they have treated this novel, and treated her, Agnes Grey, as being fixated on uh, the unsavory aspects of society. She, you know, calls them out and tells them, like, I'm just depicting the truth. Like, there's nothing that I exaggerated in my novels, and I think that it is important for the novelist to respect the truth and represent the truth, especially when it comes to more unsavory aspects of life and more unsavory characters, because, as she says, like, to represent a bad thing in its least offensive light is doubtless the most agreeable course for a writer of fiction to pursue, but is it the most honest or the safest? Is it better to reveal the snares and pitfalls of life to the young and thoughtless traveler, or to cover them with branches or flowers? O reader, if there were less of this delicate concealment of facts, this whispering peace, peace, when there is no peace, there would be less of sin and misery to the young of both sexes who are left to wring their bitter knowledge from experience. A lot of novels, or there was a lot of discussion about novels being um, sort of didactic and moral in order to instruct the young and to instruct people on how to live moral, upstanding lives. I don't really agree with that necessarily, but I do think there's truth to what she's saying here, and I do think that it is important to, as she says, represent bad things as truthfully as they are, and explore those things, and we shouldn't shy away from exploring those things in fiction. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we are supporting or promoting those things. Literature in general is a place for humanity to explore its light and its dark aspects and its complexity. So, yeah, it made me think a lot. Another thing that I found really interesting from the preface, and I really wish I could go back in time and like ask her and talk to her about what she's saying here, but she's basically responding to a critic who, or to readers who feel as though her novels have provide more pain than pleasure. She apologizes for that, because it wasn't her intention, but that while she does love to give innocent pleasure in her work, or provide that in her work, she said, "Be it understood, I shall not limit my ambition to this, or even to producing a perfect work of art. time and talent so spent I should consider wasted and misapplied. And so I think she's making a very refreshing comment on the artistic and process and the writer's process. Strangely enough, I feel like less so in other fields, but there seems to be this pressure to produce like the most perfect work of art, the most worldly work of art, and to say something very profound every time um, one endeavors to write. I recently have been, as a writer myself, I've been trying to um, work on my perfectionist habits and my perfectionist tendencies, where I feel as though any piece of work I write has to be perfect. It has to be representative of me at my peak and at my most profound. And so she's saying here that one shouldn't pursue this in dismissal of the truth. Um, Truth should be, in her eyes, truth should be the most important pursuit. Okay. Looking a bit different. Had to step out for a second and go to therapy, but I'm back. I don't really remember what I was saying, but I am reading The Tenet of Waffle Hall, and yeah. The other book that I am reading as well that is related to Tenet of Waffle Hall is the Brontë Myth by Lucas Miller. This is according to the back, a brilliant combination of biography, literary criticism, and history. And it kind of looks at how the Brontë sisters became cultural icons and the way that they are spoken about and presented as kind of figures of myth. In the introduction, Lucas Miller says that it is a meta-biography that at some points can come off as anti-biography, but is not the case. And yeah, I am reading this because, as well as the Tenet of Waffle Hall, because I have a self-designed Brontë course coming up for the spring semester, and I felt like this book would be pretty good to include on my syllabus, and this is also one of the books that are on the syllabus, but the only one of the Brontë novels that is on the syllabus that I have not yet read. So those are kind of in preparation for the semester. The other novel that I'm in the middle of is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And this is my second Dostoevsky novel. I have been reading this for probably a few months, but I just keep going back to reread certain parts and certain chapters. And I actually got about halfway through. I got to the point just after the Grand Inquisitor chapter, and I was so struck by the Grand Inquisitor and the chapter right before that, which is, I believe, Rebellion. I was just so struck by the concepts and the discussion of God and evil and the problem of evil, and just like the existence of cruelty in humanity, and like whether or not the existence of evil discounts the presence of God on earth, discounts the existence of God at all. I was just so struck by these chapters that, not gonna lie, it put me in a depressive episode for a while. And I put the book down. I just felt like I just couldn't go on. I needed like just some time to really sit with it. And then because I took that gap, I picked it back up and decided to start the novel over. Not that I feel that this book needs to be read all in one go, but I did feel like it would have been better for me personally to refresh myself on some of the discussions in the earlier chapters and refresh myself on the characters. But it's gotten to a point where I think I've now reread the first chunk of this book like maybe 3 or 4 times, and I know it pretty well now. But yeah, I really have been enjoying that kind of reading process. There's no real reason to rush through any sort of novels or any books that you're reading. I think it's more important to digest them and take the time to digest them. I don't plan on rushing through my subsequent reread of this because, yeah, I kind of don't want it to end. But the next book I'm going to talk about that I'm currently reading, I'm doing a reread of the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, and I am up to Memnoch, the Devil. I kind of read these books a little out of order initially because the first book that I ended up picking up in the series, way too young, was The Vampire Armand. And if you know anything about that book, a 10 to 12-year-old, I don't remember exactly what age I was, around there, should not have been reading that, but alas, it did kind of create my entire personality. Thankful to that book. I grew up with my mom reading Anne Rice, and so I had been a big fan of the Queen of the Damned movie and was really into the 1994 Into the Vampire adaptation. I had been aware, or had read chunks of the previous novels, but I had not processed that they were all the same series very much. But yeah, Lestat and the Vampire Chronicles is a childhood favorite of mine, and yeah, I'm really enjoying my reread of it. Actually, I can't wait to get back to the Vampire Armand. This all kicked off pretty much, I'd say last year. No, the previous year, 2022. I don't know what year we're living in. At the end of 2022, I believe, I watched, like many of us, the Into the Vampire TV series, AMC's Into the Vampire, with Jacob Anderson and Sam Reed as Louis and Lestat. And I had been waiting for that adaptation for many years, had been following the production of that adaptation for many years, and it did not disappoint. And it kind of rekindled my obsession with the Vampire Chronicles. Since then, I have pretty much done nothing but think of these melancholic and truly insane vampires. Yeah, it's been great. It's been a good time. So I've also been reading this. I'm pretty early on as well in it. But yeah, it's been fun. The last book that I'm going to talk about of my currently reading, it's a book that I'm reading on my e-reader, To Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer. It is a sci-fi series, the first in a sci-fi series that's set in I think 2050 something. It's a really complicated book to explain. I am just barely holding on, understanding what's going on. I picked it up because I had looked up on Reddit books that were similar to the Locked Tomb, or books that you would enjoy if you like the Locked Tomb series, which I love the Locked Tomb series very deeply, and this was on the list and it caught my eye, so I picked it up and I'm giving it a go. It is very dense and very confusing so far, but it's also very entertaining, and I'm really interested to see where it's going. I'm not somebody who reads a lot of sci-fi or has read a lot of sci-fi. The Locked Tomb was kind of my first real foray into sci-fi fantasy, and I really enjoyed it. I've always been really interested in space, and it's a special interest of mine, but I never really got into sci-fi, mostly because it's a little bit intimidating. Since I've read The Locked Tomb, I really wanted to kind of dig into it as a genre more, and this is one of my other attempts, and I'm enjoying it. I am enjoying it. So the next books that I want to talk about are books that I've recently acquired, connected to books that we most recently talked about. I purchased The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky and The Adolescent by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I got them in the Vintage Classics translations by Richard Pivert and Larissa Volokonsky. Yeah, since the Everyman's Library editions are also translated by them, and I am enjoying this translation, I thought I would pick up the other ones. I think The Idiot is going to be my next Dostoevsky novel after I finish Brothers Karamazov, but yeah, I thought I would grab them since I had like a $20 reward from Barnes & Noble. The next book are some really cool old books. I got this very old edition of Celtic Myth and Legend, Poetry and Romance by Charles Squire. And I believe this, it doesn't say the year of publication, I don't think actually, but I believe these are from the 20s or the 40s, 1940s. Not entirely sure, but they're definitely old, very beautiful gold foiling, and a lot of foxing on the pages. But there is gold edges up at the top, and yeah, I have really been interested in this specific series of world myths and legends because they kind of approach them in a comparative way. So they compare with other myths and legends of the regions and talk about the historical context and kind of explore them in an archaeological sense as well. In addition to the Celtic myths, I also got Myths of Crete and Pre-Hellenic Europe by Donald A. Mackenzie. Similar premise. I have been obsessed with Crete and I've been obsessed with ancient Greece recently and like the ancient Minoans and stuff. So I thought this would be really interesting to read. Another book that I've picked up recently is this edition, Everyman's Library edition of Marguerite Duras, her novel The Lover, The Wartime Notebooks, and Practicalities. I have had The Lover on my radar to read for quite some time now, so when I came across this, I thought, perfect, I will pick this up, and hopefully I will get into it soon. It's introduced by Rachel Kushner, who I believe... Actually, no, I got her confused with Rachel Cusk just now, and that's not who I was thinking of, but I feel like I have read something by Rachel Kushner, but I do not remember what. But yeah, hopefully I'll dig into this soon. The last novel that I wanted to talk about that I picked up recently is the Marquis de Sade's Philosophy in the Boudoir. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I have minimal understanding of French, but that sounds right to me. Let's hope that's the case. But yeah, I've always wanted to read de Sade. I have not yet picked up his other novels, like Justine or 120 Days of Sodom, but I do think that maybe this is, a good place to start and see if I like his writing. I love anything transgressive, anything demented has my interest pretty much. So, hoping that I can get to this eventually. I have a lot to get to, very clearly. But, yeah, that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys are reading, if you're reading anything interesting. And I hope to see you guys in another one. Alright, bye.